The RCMP Heritage Centre is a not-for-profit charitable organisation mandated to share the story of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. This is one of those stories, part of your heritage.
So I arrive in Burnchurch, New Brunswick, and I'm back home after 25 years in the force. My family are ecstatic. They have grandparents, they have cousins, first time in their lives. You know, we were, up until that point in time, we were in Alberta and then a short while here in Ottawa, but now everybody was home. And I used to deliver milk down in the community of Burnchurch as a young boy. When I was in high school, I used to deliver milk down that way. So I knew the area very well, and I knew the people very well. And I was stationed at 𝑇ℎ𝑒 𝐹𝑟𝑖𝑒, New Brunswick. And I was there 9 days. And one night, 15 Aboriginal fishers were out on the waters, and the Department of Fisheries and Oceans went out and arrested them for fishing lobster outside the fishing season. Well, Aboriginal people fished lobster in Miramichi Bay for centuries during that time of the year because they come in close and they think white people are crazy to go risk their lives in white ladle boats when you can walk along the water knee deep and pick them up. But the Acadian people were furious that because they saw their livelihood in jeopardy. But this had been building for some period of time, and the year before, 1999, there was an outbreak. So the Aboriginal people of Burnchurch had brought in warriors from Oka, from 𝑇ℎ𝑒 from New York, even as far away as Montana. They had a huge contingent of warriors with illegal weapons. So that night when Fisheries and Oceans went out, Fisheries and Oceans officers went out and arrested these young Aboriginal guys, within an hour, the warriors brought 2 cars full of oil up onto the main highway, Highway 11, going up into the Canadian Peninsula, and set them ablaze. And the crisis was on. Well, I spent my life now, as we mentioned, 10 years up in the Northwest Territories with Aboriginal people, and growing up in Miramichi, Newcastle, I had a lot of contact with Aboriginal people. But that night, I sent down 2 plainclothes Aboriginal officers with 2 big jugs of Tim Hortons coffee and donuts. And it was accepted by the warriors, but I mean, like, you know, what's that? Because they wanted to fight, you know? Well, the next morning, the Premier of the province called Tim Quigley. Who in the hell is that inspector? Rule of law, clean that highway off. But anyways, during the conversations, my side is, listen, measured approach. We have toolbox, all kinds of tools. There's a detour around the roadblock. The public is not in any danger. Let's keep this going. And Phil Murray, God bless him, supported me. But I mean, the community was mad, like they wanted action, predominantly Acadians. The provincial government wanted us to act. And I had, within a couple of days, 150, 200 RCMP officers, all wanting, the TAC team guys wanted to do their thing, your team guys wanted to do their thing. So to try to keep this, no guys, measured approach. And I just kept feeding them. We just kept going down there every day to the barricades. First day, CBC, CTV, Global. Third day, ABC, NBC. They were all there waiting for the Oka takedown, and we just didn't give it to them. And on the 6th day, the Aboriginals themselves, frustrated that they weren't going to get a fight, they took down the barricade, and out on the water they went. That summer, every night I was on national TV being interviewed with regards to the issues in Burnchurch. And frequently there'd be gunshots out on the water between the two. And the Acadian fishers from Bay St. Anne would come across the bay and rip up the Aboriginal lobster nets and cut them and destroy them. So I had a young sergeant was with me, Francois Bidel, and Francois is still in NACOM, still in the force now, he's done very well. So anyways, we did some research, and what we found was in 1758, the Acadians were being expelled out of Nova Scotia. England and France were at war. Wolfe and Montcalm were fighting it out on the plains of Abraham. Wolfe heard of the Acadians coming into Miramichi Bay. So he dispensed to Colonel James Murray and 3 naval ships to go down and get rid of the Frenchmen in Miramichi Bay. Colonel James Murray writes back to Wolfe, in allegiance to your orders, we have sailed into Miramichi Bay and we've got rid of the Frenchmen in 2 of the communities. In the 3rd community, the Indians have taken the Frenchmen and hidden them and protected them from us, but we've burnt everything to the ground, including a beautiful stone church, burnt church. And as you drive into Nigawak, an Acadian village, Rivière de 𝑒𝑟𝑖𝑡𝑒, River of the Hidden, that's where the Aboriginals protected the Acadians from the English in the alders of this little brook just up from Burnt Church. So I remember going down one night to an arena in Nigawak with the Acadian fishers, and they were giving, these black bastards, get them off the water, they're ruining our livelihood. En français, je leur cette lettre, and explained to them, the only reason you survived as a people was because the people of Burnt Church protected you from the English. 𝑆𝑐𝑎𝑟𝑙𝑒𝑡 used to call that the miracle of Burnt Church, because things really started to gel for us, and we had fisheries and oceans into, as white fishers began to retire, those commercial licenses were being more evenly distributed to the Aboriginal fishers, so more of them. To this day, there still rests a lot of tension between the Acadian fishers and the Aboriginal fishers, but it was resolved through the Canadian way, a measured approach. From there, I went up to Ottawa. They made me a chief superintendent after Burnt Church. So I went up to Ottawa, and basically my family said at that time, have fun, Dad. We're staying here in New Brunswick, and I've been commuting ever since. But I went to Ottawa, and Ottawa was a very interesting place. There's a very systemic dysfunction in the force in that the commanding officers have 2 gods. They have the commissioner and they have their premier and whoever their provincial policing rep is. My observations, there's a tendency to pay a lot of lip service to the commissioner, but the glory is with being the friend of the premier and doing whatever you can for the province. You know, you're your own little warlord. You're the chief of the provincial police force, and Ottawa's the nice place to go and sit around for meetings. But what the hell does Ottawa know? And I was always frustrated with that there couldn't be more collaborative efforts between the division managers and the Ottawa managers. But it was all about developing relationships, and in the hot spots, I was able to have a good relationship. Al McIntyre, who was a criminal ops officer in British Columbia, so there would always be cases every day coming out of British Columbia that the commissioner had to be briefed on. And Al McIntyre, God bless him, he'd get up at 4:30 in the morning British Columbia time, 3:30 in the morning British Columbia time, and always brief me on what happened the night before, because you'd always have member-involved shootings in BC. It was always big city crime there that had to be reported on. And Al, but again, just developing those relationships that thankfully he'd always keep me informed, and I was able to brief up to the commissioner as to what went on. But you really had to work hard and cementing those relationships with the crops officers, because they would just ignore you. You know, you're from Ottawa, what do you know? That was something magic, you know. You solve homicides, you go down to El Paso and do major drug investigations. But you move to Ottawa, you're a nobody, like you're an idiot. And so that's always a dichotomy that I think the force will always have.
You then transitioned out of the force.
Yes.
Stayed in Ottawa.
Yes.
To a new job. Tell us how that transition.
It was just one day. It was just one day, and I received a phone call, and no, I'm going to back up a little bit because I think it's important. I went to a meeting, a high-level meeting, one afternoon with some senior officers in the force, and they were speaking about different women managers in the force. And the comments I was hearing at the time were not consistent with my personal values as a member. So I got thinking, you know, Kevin, you know, I was chief superintendent, 29 years service, you love the force. Do you really want to go on here and continue this? So, you know, I was questioning. I was questioning then, like, you know, this issue. The force was having women, and I was, you know, as I say, I was concerned about my values, and the force's publicized values, but the behaviors of senior management not being consistent with those values. And one day I got a phone call out of the blue from a private company. Would you be interested in becoming director of security at House of Commons? And it was a promotion for me. I was in EX2. This was going to be in EX3. And, you know, I said, Kevin, you've had a wonderful career. Nobody's had a career like this. Like, no one has had a career like I've had. So I decided to go down for an interview, and I went down, and the first thing I saw was a father and a son playing Frisbee on the lawns of Parliament Hill. And I was enamored with this place, and I wanted to protect it. And so anyway, I went through several interviews, and sure enough, I was offered the job as director of security. A year later, my predecessor, Sergeant at Arms, passed away. I never did meet him. He was always critically ill, and I never did get to meet the gentleman. But anyway, I get an invite with 6 other people from across Canada for the position of Sergeant at Arms. And this is the same interview process for the big positions: the commissioner, the deputy ministers. It's over in PCO. Patricia Hazard was the senior advisor of appointments. David Penner was the Prime Minister's Director of Appointments. Maureen Murphy was the Chief of Staff of Bob Nicholson, the Government House Leader. And they put you through an interview which is consistent of a Chief Superintendent interview. And strategic priorities, performance measurement, performance management. But the last question, the Chief of Staff, Maureen Murphy, she asked me, she said, why do you want to become Sergeant at Arms? And I looked at her and I said, you know, I never thought I'd ever do anything since I was in grade 2, but be a member of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. But I came down here to Parliament a year ago, saw father and son playing on the lawns of Frisbee, on the lawns of Parliament Hill, and I fell in love with the place, and I wanted to keep it safe from harm. And I said, I had an Aunt Anne-Marie who used to teach me poetry. Well, all these people, like, this is high-level stuff. What is this guy talking about poetry? And I said, one of the poems she taught me was Robert Frost, called Mending Wall. And I started. Something there is that does not love a wall, that wants it down, that makes the frozen ground swell up under it. Before I built a wall, I would ask what I was walling in, what I was walling out, and to whom I'd be likely to give offense. Something there is that does not love a wall, that wants it down. And I looked around the room and I said, if you people make me the Sergeant at Arms, there will be no walls built around Canada's Parliament buildings. I stopped. And you could just feel the heaviness in the room. I knew I had the job. I was the first one interviewed of the 6. I knew I had the job. And sure enough, I became the 9th Sergeant at Arms of the House of Commons. In the history of our Confederation, I was the 9th Sergeant at Arms. And I went to work for an incredible lady who just kept giving me more and more responsibility. I had over 1,000 people there. I was looking after all the renovations of the Parliament buildings. I had a team of 80 architects, engineers that were looking after the requirements, house requirements for the design and renovations of the buildings. I brought stakeholders together, senior people in public works. Jim Flaherty, the finance minister, was a friend of mine. I was able to facilitate meetings that we could get the business cases and the memorandums to cabinet through. And if I look back on my life, I think that's probably one of the things that I have, is that the renovations of the buildings has my DNA all over it. But not only did I have the renovation of the buildings, I had 350 guys in security. I looked after 30 buildings, food services, bus transportation. We're Canada Post's #1 largest mail client. It was a big undertaking. But thankfully for me, I've always kept myself in shape. I ran every day, and I always kept myself qualified with my firearm. And obviously then that fateful day came, October 22nd. And there's a cute story here. The first person I met when I went to the House of Commons was a young lady by the name of Nicole Muller. And Nicole was a clerk's assistant and who I reported to. And she was such an innocent little person. And I remember thinking, what a nice place this is going to be to work, you know. Well, on the morning of October 22nd in my office, what were we talking about? And who was I talking about it with? Was Nicole Muller. And I heard the gunshots. And I usually, as a rule, carried my firearm all the time. I'd just come back from a meeting across the street, so I had my firearm in the back room, locked away in its gun box. But I ran back there, and I brought Nicole with me, and there's a couple of other assistants in my office back to my back room. I unlocked the gun box. I charged up my gun, put the clip in. I cranked one up into the chamber, and I went out into the just outside my office. And directly across from the hallway was one of our constables, Constable 𝑇ℎ𝑒 𝐹𝑟𝑖𝑒, and he was roaring at me, "Sergeant, he's down there." And it was a little alcove about 40 feet from me on the right hand side. And this time I looked up, and the Hall of Honor was empty. Like the members of the RCMP at that time were just coming into the building. So anyways, I ran up along the wall up to the other side of the pillar, and I could hear the suspect breathing, and he was breathing in an intensely labored manner. So I suspected that he had been hit by the gunshots. And then I looked, and you could see the barrel of the weapon, like just feet away from me on the other side of the pillar, like he had it out on a 45-degree angle from the thing. And I had this fleeting thought of just reaching out and grabbing the barrel of the weapon and pulling it. Prior to doing that, I went and tried to peek around the corner. And just as I peeked, he had already done the same thing. And all I saw was the tip of his head going back into the alcove behind the pillar. I have no recollection of this, but he fired the gun, and loud boot. I totally have no recollection. But the moment that he fired, I dove through the air around the pillar. And while I was in the air, I remember shooting once, and I can remember the suspect going, "Ugh!" And I hit the floor, very hard, and I was shooting at the suspect, and I sat up, and the suspect, after one or two shots, had fallen to the ground right at my feet. So closer than I am, and you and I are sitting, I'm sitting there, and I'm shooting, and shooting until my 15 bullets have been discharged. At the same time, the members of the RCMP are arriving, and their bullet casings of one of the members, as he's shooting, the casings are popping up onto me. Like I'm sitting right on the floor with the suspect on the floor, and the members are standing over the top of me. The RCMP member is standing over the top of me, and another hail of bullets are coming down into the suspect. I got up, and I just wanted to make sure that the rest of the building was secure. I went out and went over, back into my office, got another clip of bullets into my gun, and checked make sure that all our members were in place at the doors and entry points, and it was all secure. Went in, and I called my wife Anne, and to call my mother, and to call my children that I'm okay. And from there, I went back out, just ensuring that we had peace. The Ottawa City Police, the RCMP officers were starting to come into the building then. I just wanted to make sure that everything was, and we had a critical incident command system set up and running. And then some of the Ottawa City Police guys, it was emergency response team guys, and obviously there was some miscommunication internally with Ottawa City Police. They came in a side door, and they came back as I was coming down, and they said, "Who are you? And you're going to come with us." And I initially said, well, look, I'm the chief of police here. This is my building, like, you know. And then I think, I said, hey, Kevin, everything's in control here. There's no, it's only going to get more complicated with the guys thing. So anyways, I explained that I was one of the guys who had participated in the final shooting of the suspect. And they asked if I would go with them. And so I went, and they took me outside the building and herded me down some laneways, because it was absolute chaos. When I got in the Ottawa City Police car, like, the nonsense on the radio was unbelievable. Reports of guys on top of Center Block, shooting in Queen Street. Like, I mean, everybody downtown was panicking, and they were calling Ottawa City Police with what they thought were legitimate concerns and things, And it even turned out some of these people, man with a gun, were Ottawa City Police officers themselves, from specialized units who put balaclavas on. But people thinking in downtown Ottawa, there's more terrorists here, So it was chaos. Anyways, I went over to Ottawa City Police and provided them with my statement. And they were very good. They had a lady that I sat down with, and a counselor, and she had a little conversation. I guess she thought I was okay to go, and I went back, and we have an operations office, command center in our security office, which is downtown Ottawa, away from Parliament Hill. So I spent the rest of the day there just monitoring and doing whatever I could to assist the RCMP and Ottawa City Police and our guys to the day. We stayed that night. I was there at the office about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, because people were locked up in the buildings for hours in their offices. So they had no place to go to the bathroom other than garbage cans. So the whole building was like in a state of disarray. And then, of course, everybody wanted Parliament to open up as soon as possible to reassure Canadians that situation normal. We're back, and Canada's a resilient country, and Canadians are resilient. We wanted to show that to the world. We didn't want the fear and the uncertainty and chaos to continue. So, most of my night, or late hours that night and early morning hours, that early morning hours were spent with my staff, so that we could get the right cleaning crew in and get that building ready to open up Parliament. It was an incredible team effort I'm never so proud of those people, the work they did, and to get that building back up in a state of readiness that we could host Parliament the next day. I told a story at Mount Allison University. I had a hard time sleeping that night. I woke up at 5:30 in the morning, hearing gunshots. I woke up and I was crying. My mom called at 8:30 that morning and said, "Kevin, are you doing okay?" And I said, "Mom, I'm doing just fine." Yes, I was doing just fine. And I think if you look at the look on my face the day I took the mace in to the standing ovation of members of Parliament, I wasn't fine. If you look at my face. But anyway, the next morning she calls me again and she says, "Kevin, I know you're doing okay, but your son Andrew and your daughter Laura, and Andrew's a police officer himself in Miramichi. I'm not sure, Kevin. I think you should come home." And I said, "Mom, they'll be fine." And now it's Saturday morning, and again she calls. And so I decided that maybe I better go home. Mom wanted me home. So I jumped in the truck. I had just bought a brand new Toyota Tundra and headed home. And I was driving through the Plaster Rock Renews Highway. And I got thinking of these 17 men who I've taken confessions from, who've killed people, and the suspect that I had shot and participated in the Hall of Honor. And I decided I was going to pray for them. And when I got home, so I got home about 3:30, 4:45 in the morning, and I phoned our family priest, Father Leon Creamer. He was awake, and it was almost like he was expecting my phone call. And I said, "Father, would you come up this morning to say Mass? I have a log home on the Northwest Miramichi." And he said, "Kevin, I'll be there." And then I phoned my daughter, Laura, and she was awake, breastfeeding my 4-week-old grandson, Lachlan. She said, "Dad, we're coming. I phoned two aunts who were Catholic nuns in St. John, and that's about a 3-hour drive up to Miramichi. And they said, Kevin, we're coming. Went to bed, 8:30, got up, called my mom. I said, Mom, I'm home. She was ecstatic, just absolutely ecstatic that I was home. Called my son Andrew and Mary. So anyway, 11 o'clock, we have the family mass, and during mass, we have the first reading, second reading in the Catholic service. There's prayers for the attention of the faithful. And my mom, she starts, and she says a prayer for Kathy Cirillo. That's Nathan Cirillo's mom, the young corporal that got shot and killed. And she says a prayer for Suzanne Zayoff. And Suzanne Zayoff is Michael Zayoff's mother, the guy that I shot. And she was known right after that she hated her son and hate what he did and whatever, but Mom said a prayer for her. And, you know, I was sitting there on the chair. I had Lachlan, my 4-week-old grandson, here. I had Luke, my 3-year-old, here. And I had Reese here, you know, and I got thinking, Christ, when he was crucified on the cross, the first person he let into heaven was the guy who was crucified next to him, a convicted criminal. And he's the first guy, if you believe in the Bible, that Christ allowed into the kingdom of heaven. And I'm sitting there with my 3 grandchildren, so I said a prayer for Michael, the man that I shot in the Hall of Honor. And after Mass, I went by myself down to the river. And, you know, 2 things struck me, you know, the importance of home, importance of family, the importance of going to somewhere that is, you know, peaceful in your life where you just go. But then, you know, as I told the students at Mount Allison, you know, the importance of mothers. Mom knew. She knew I had to be home, not the children, you know, and she was able to organize it. And but the good thing is, I'm fine. I'm good, and it's over. And Canada's good. And I think if there's any good thing now today is that I can be a symbol for Canada that, in the face of danger, Canadians don't back down.